Hi everyone, this is Taylor Straub, and I will be giving you a presentation on observations as data collection techniques. So observations are described as a set of qualitative data that involve carefully watching and systematically recording what you see and hear going on in a particular setting. This was from the Mertler article that we were to read. Observations can be considered structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. The article went on to describe what structured and semi-structured and unstructured looks like. So structured observations is where the main focus is the observation taking place, looking for specific behaviors, interactions, and reactions. Semi-structured and unstructured allow for more flexibility. They allow for the researcher or the teacher to complete other activities during the observation, but also have times of focused observation. And then unstructured is more free-flowing, and the researcher can observe when needed. So from another article that I found, this just discussed some of the different processes or ways that researchers can perform observations. So the first one is non-participation, where the researcher is not present during the observation. They're watching or observing from another site. This would be if you were recording yourself teaching and then someone else was observing from a different classroom. Complete observer is where the researcher is present but not interacting. They're just observing, listening, and kind of eavesdropping. But as they're observing, they can be videotaping, audio taping, or looking at photographs as well, or taking photographs as well. There was one that they discussed where it was the observer as a participant, where the participants know the objective that the researcher has, and then the researcher can conduct interviews and ask questions. And then moderate or peripheral is where the researcher interacts with insiders and engages in similar activities, but according to Adler, he or she does not participate in those activities that stand at the core of group membership and identification. So that was from the Baker article that I was reading through to gain more information. Processes and procedures that are unique, again, to observation is there are trainings that make sure that you fully understand how to conduct ethnographic research. You have to think about the gaining access to the subjects in which you're going to study. It could take time depending on what type of research you're doing. An example that I was thinking was if we weren't teachers, we would need, and if we needed to observe students, we would need to gain access into the school building, which would require clearances and things like that, which would take time. Leaving the field, how will you leave after your research is completed? Will it be abrupt or gradual? Will there be an emotional attachment at the end? So going with that same example, if you were in a classroom, you would obviously be building relationships with those students that you're observing. Would you just leave? Would there be a gradual way that you would leave? And would there be an emotional attachment both for you and for the students that you're observing? The length of time in the field, depending on the research question or study that you're doing, it could be longer or shorter. And then some different ways for data collection through observation would be field notes, logs, and you also use the 5 senses. So the observations are considered to be qualitative because they're looking at interactions, reactions, specific behaviors or actions. The types of questions that this technique would best answer would be if you're looking at student behavior, understanding concepts through discussions with students, participation, student engagement, interactions and relationships, and then also student focus, where you're looking at how long a student's on task or off task. Some strengths that were discussed in the Mertler article were that it allows for actual student data or student behavior data instead of biases or perceptions. It allows for this teacher to observe things they may not have noticed through just interacting with the child. And then with different resources available for the educator to use during observations, they're able to see more than what they normally would, but when they're just teaching their classes. Some weaknesses from the article was just that observations can change student behavior depending on the resource being used to collect data. Whether they see someone with a paper or pencil, video recording or audio recording could change the observation or of what you're seeing. If students are aware that they're being observed, their behavior could change and you would not get accurate results or findings. If teachers are working collaboratively, they might interpret the data differently. It could be tedious and time-consuming for a teacher or researcher to take those observations. In addition, despite the level of involvement with the study group, the researcher must always remember his or her primary role as a researcher and remain detached enough to collect and analyze data relevant to the problem and under investigation. So as we're going through this, if we are taking observations, we need to make sure that we're being the teacher when we're the teacher and that we're being the researcher when we need to be and taking that bias away. What concerns do I have about this technique? So for ethical, something that I found in the Baker article that I read was that videotaping and photographing students was mentioned a lot. And if districts have a form that parents need to fill out, whether or not their child's photo can be taken and things like that, that would be something that we would need to look into if you're choosing to do observation. Also, it was mentioned guilty knowledge, where confidential information is revealed through the research. Validity would be where we're looking at teacher bias, just the interpretation of the data. And then if the researcher is doing selective recording, depending on what their research question is, to either make their results look better or different. And then reliability. For observation, my biggest concern would just be that students' emotion, if you're looking at with participation or engagement or even student behavior, any of those things, students come to school with different emotions or different events that happen. So my biggest concern would be that observations would change if students have other outside factors that are affecting either their behavior or their attitude or their mood. The observation data could then be skewed due to those outside factors that are affecting their behavior or anything like that. Here are the references that I used as I was working through and learning a little bit more about observation. I look forward to watching and learning a little bit more about the data collection techniques that you guys have also researched a little bit. Please let me know if you have any questions about observation. Thanks.